Hey dads, here is the ultimate guide to know exactly what's going to happen at every single appointment that you will go through your wife's pregnancy. Be ready, be prepared. Here we go. So you just found out you're pregnant. Your very first thoughts is, okay, what's next? And what happens is essentially this. Your wife will set up an appointment with the OB. Okay. And essentially that will be the doctor that will oversee the pregnancy throughout the entirety. Sometimes they help deliver, but it just depends which doctor is there on that final day. But before we get there, let's break down each appointment and exactly what it will look like, exactly what it will entail. Note, this process will vary based upon where you are located, where you live. I'm giving an example if you live in the United States. Okay. So if you live in the US, this is a typical pregnancy outlook on appointments. Again, but it can vary slightly depending on where you are. So in my case, what basically happens, there were two separate events that can take place. So when you find out you're pregnant, one, when your wife calls the OB, they can set up something called a financial appointment. And essentially what a financial appointment is, before you even get in, before they even check, before there's an ultrasound, they basically give an outline of payment so they can have an understanding of where your insurance lies, essentially how they're going to get paid and to see you through the entire process. So don't be surprised if you get called in for a financial advisement first, and then after that, you'll begin to set up your appointments. Now, when are the appointments? Your first actual appointment that your wife will go to and that you can also be a part of, this will be taking place at 8 to 9 weeks. And again, remember, this is based upon individualistic stories, because sometimes you may come in earlier if there's history. My wife and I had to come in early. We went in at 6 weeks just because of our history, essentially pregnancy before, that we had to kind of navigate and be ultimately aware of to make sure that everything was going okay. So in your case, you may start off at the 8 or 9 week, or depending on history, again, you may start at 6 weeks. So 8 weeks, what happens there? So when you first get in, you will obviously fill out paperwork, insurances, all that kind of thing. When you get there, your wife will get called back, and the first thing they're going to do is they're basically going to say, congratulations, we're excited to have you here. And they began testing vitals. So what vitals are is just they check your weight, they check your height, blood pressure, all those things. So they check the average things. This will be done pretty much almost every appointment. At this point, after they did go through all of the vitals, they will then actually go to an ultrasound. Please note, this ultrasound, husbands, please tell your wives this, and wives, if you're listening, please note, the first 8 or 9 week ultrasound is an invasive one, meaning that they will essentially be invasive, if you understand. So be prepared for that, because in movies, the only thing that you see happening is they see the little belly one. But that's actually not the case for the very first one. That actually, because things are so small and just getting rolling, the belly one can't actually perceive exactly what's happening, what they need to know. So the very first appointment, the 8 week, is invasive. But with that being said, they check heartbeat and essentially making sure that everything is starting to develop, right? They want to make sure everything is going okay and that you've officially started the process. So they don't want someone coming in thinking that they're pregnant. They want to actually double confirm that. And that's essentially what this 8 or 9 week appointment is for. Because chances are you just peed on a stick and then you're the very first one come in. And if you know anything about pregnancy tests, at least more in recent history, false positives were very common. So they just like to double check to be sure. And sometimes you can misread or get excited or missee something. So they double check that. And the only way they can see that is with the invasive portion. Also, they will check for something called HCG levels. Now, depending on where you are, this will be different for you. But please note that lab work or blood being drawn can take place in the facility of your appointment, or it can also be taking place somewhere else. Okay, so you may have to go somewhere else. Your wife may have to go somewhere else for blood work in order to check these levels. In our case, it was in the same facility, so they were able to draw blood and essentially look at the levels. You will not get the results right away. It takes typically a couple days, but I believe they allot for a week before those levels can come back. And essentially what these levels are, and what you need to know about these levels, is very simple. The level amount that you start with really does not matter. It can be a small amount, it could be a large amount. The only thing that matters is when you go back for the second round of the blood work, what really matters is that your levels are increasing. and increasing their, they say it's good to double, if not more. So if your levels are increasing and doubling, that's a great sign. That means everything is rolling in the right direction. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, or sometimes the case can be, this is how they identify if the mother or if your wife is potentially going to have a miscarriage or some hormonal imbalances, all these things. This can be caught by the HCG levels. So if your levels come back, if your wife's levels come back and they stay the same or they are dropping, just be prepared for the news that may follow. Again, I wasn't made aware of these things. This is the ultimate guide, so you can be prepared for every single scenario that may be thrown your way. So I hope that never crosses your path, but it is something to be aware of, something that someone told me. So that's pretty much what happens at the first appointment, the 8 to 9 weeks, just depending again on your history. After that appointment is concluded, you kind of get this feeling you kind of get left out to dry, kind of. It's what I feel like, is what it feels like, because you're so excited, you're so enthralled, and you kind of like, if you could, you will go back every single day to hear your baby's heartbeat. You will go back every single moment to check and make sure everything's okay. But the appointments are spaced out from this point every 4 weeks, so about a month out. But after 8 or 9 week, you'll go to about the 12 or 13 week, right? And at this appointment, basically, it's super simple. You go in, they check your vitals again, blood pressure, good. Height, weight, make sure, if you're gaining weight, make sure all those things. They may measure your belly at some point, but just depends. So during this appointment, basically all they do is they'll take out, I believe it's called a Doppler. And what they do is they just put this on your wife's belly and they just check the heartbeat. And they just make sure the heart is beating. Basically, that's a good enough signal for them that they say, okay, everything's rolling smooth, the heart is still beating. The reason why they do it every 4 weeks is due to the developmental process. It just takes about that much time for the next stages to occur. So again, you're growing the whole time, but they like to monitor the progress kind of monthly. And then they schedule out another 4 weeks. So this is going to be your 16-week appointment. All right. And this is identical to the 12-week. Everything's the same. Your wife will go in, they'll check her vitals, and they'll just say, hey, how everything's progressing, any changes, anything you should be concerned about. And then they'll check the Doppler again, just to make sure her heartbeat is good. During this time, between the 12-week and the 16-week-ish appointment, you will have the opportunity to take blood work. And what blood work means is you can essentially find out the gender, and they also actually have the availability now through technology. They can check for diseases, they can check for chromosomes, so things like Down syndrome. They can check all of those things through the blood work. Again, because of where we are in technology, you actually get access to this information via app, depending, again, where you are. But in our case, in the US, most of the time we've advanced to the point to where there's apps available that you can actually look at your results and things of that nature ahead of time. But don't draw any conclusions unless your doctor gives you that information. So you will receive things through the app about your blood work taken at this point, again, between that 12 and 16 week checkup. You will receive information through that app, but you can try to decipher it. But my advice to you is just wait for the doctor to kind of confirm exactly what you were thinking. Because sometimes we can read something and we can misinterpret it, and then we're worried for no reason. And then we're wondering, why didn't the doctor call us, or what can be wrong with the baby? Meanwhile, we're just not understanding, oh, this is supposed to happen. That's a good thing. Or if something is concerning, that way they can confirm it. So just make sure that you wait for the official doctor's report that they're going to give you, so you understand and they understand. You guys can all be on the same page of exactly what information you are receiving. So it's good to get kind of a sneak peek, but at the end of the day, make sure you confirm with your doctor about what you are currently reading. All right. So that's between that 12 and 16. So after the 16-week appointment, you go to the 20-week ultrasound. And this is the big one. This is where they check literally everything that you can think of plus some. And this will be the longest appointment. So prepare for about an hour and 20 minutes, honestly. This ultrasound is actually done on top of the belly. So this is not invasive as well. And the only invasive parts about it is sometimes, depending on your doctor, how they do it, they will have to check your wife's cervix and see the distance between the cervix and the canal, basically to know like how much room they're working with, and to make sure that you have a proper birth canal that they can operate with when you do deliver. Okay. So just make sure that you are aware of that. That does take place during this time. And yeah, so at the 20 week, this is what they check for. They check size of your womb. They check the placenta. They check the baby's head. They check their feet. They check their toes. They check their hands. They check their respiratory systems, lungs, and all these things that are developing, which is an absolute miracle if you ask me. They literally go through every single detail and the size of the hips and anything you can really think of about a baby. And it's very interesting because if you actually look, you'll be able to see what's happening on a screen. And it's actually crazy because you'll be looking at the screen and you'll have no idea what you're looking at. But the nurse who does the ultrasound, or the technician who does the ultrasound, they'll circle literally gray blobs and say, "Oh, look at this. Baby's brain is growing." And you're like, "What are you talking about? I don't see a thing." And then there'll be like a little pocket in the corner and say, "Oh, look at baby's heart." You're like, "Wait, what?" It's crazy how they can recognize what is happening in there. You will not be able to understand or see what's happening. That's totally normal. My wife and I would look at each other and be like, "I don't know what she's seeing, but okay." So just be prepared for that you're not going to really understand exactly what's happening, but there will be some things that you see, like the toes and the hands, maybe the eyes and things of that nature that you can make out and say, "Oh man, like that's adorable." And you will already, it's kind of funny, you will already try to like pick out features and be like, "Oh, that's mama's hand or that's dad's foot." It's not going to be the case that way. It's fun to do though. Okay. So after the 20-week ultrasound, essentially what happens is you get scheduled basically 26 to 30 weeks. Right about that time is you start going every 2 weeks. Okay. Again, depending on your history, depending on what's happening within your own body, you will start to go about every 2 weeks. And each appointment is super simple. It probably takes if your wait time is quick and your doctor is quick, the entirety of the appointment can take 30 minutes or less, but actually contact with the doctor is 5 minutes or less. And essentially what's happening every 2 weeks from this point out, from about 26 weeks on, what's happening is you walk in and they check heartbeat and it asks literally the same 5 questions. Do you notice any changes? Do you have any like discharge? Any change in medication? And you get to a point to where you can almost repeat what they're going to ask you. And me and my wife, we would play a game and to see if we can kind of like guess what they're going to say. And we were always right. So it's kind of fun. But essentially every 2 weeks to ask you the same questions. And again, they just check heartbeat. There's no need for, once that 20-week happens, essentially if everything is rolling smooth, there's no need to go back and check to make sure everything is continuing in development. If they believe something is wrong, then they will go back and check. An example maybe would be to figure out if the baby is breaching, meaning if the baby's turning right side up instead of head down. The proper way is head down, but if things start to get kind of a little wonky, they'll check and see those things. But for the most part, you go in, the appointment's 5 minutes long, check height, check weight, check vitals, check heartbeat, you're good to go. And that takes place every 2 weeks. Lastly, you get to week 36, the grand finale. Your baby's almost going to be in your arms. Your baby's going to be crying. It's going to be loved. It's going to be sheltered. All those things, all those great things. And from week 36 on to birth, your wife will go every single week. All right. So she will go every single week. And all they do there, it's the same as the other 2 appointments, but except they also check belly measurement. All right. So they'll take a little tape measure and they'll measure and see what week you're measuring. And what I mean by that is based upon your wife's belly circumference, I made that up, based upon the shape of her belly, they can actually measure what week your belly is measuring at. So for a long time, my wife was measuring a week ahead. There was a point early on where she was measuring 2 weeks ahead, but then it dropped down to a week ahead. So they just kind of measure those things and they know by centimeters. But yeah, so they'll let you know, oh, you're measuring a week ahead. And that'll take place 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, all the way up until birth. These days, they typically don't let you go more than a week, I believe, late, just based upon studies that have been done that suggest any longer than that, the placenta can actually start to lose its function and things can kind of start to go wrong. As a heads up to you guys, again, we come from an experience of giving birth in a hospital setting. You maybe have midwives or nothing, or you may give birth on a plane, who knows? The hospital experiences, they won't let you go more than 41 weeks. Now, if you made it this far, Dad, you are ultimately prepared. Do not be afraid to share that knowledge with your wife and continue to give her comfort and understanding like, hey, this is what's going to happen in the pregnancy. This is what's going to happen in the appointments. and just to kind of give her that comfort and that heads up. And again, as a dad, what kind of happens with us is we get thrown in and then we figure out information later. The wives, I don't know how they do this, but they're able to stay pretty much up to date because everything is happening to their body. But I wish there was something that I knew sooner. These are some things I wish I could have understood ahead of time. But for our next kid, I'll be on top of it. I'll be able to understand. I could tell you back and forth what's going to happen in the appointments, all those kinds of things. So if you are this far in the video, I'm soon going to have a card here that's going to take you to things that I wish I knew sooner when I found out my wife was pregnant. Until then, dads, enjoy your days. Bye-bye.